Hey, what's up, y'all? The name's Bernard. You may know me as something different a little later, but we'll get there when we get there. For now, we're gonna talk about why this is the most legendary picture ever. Obviously it's not. What I mean by that is why the concept of it is the most legendary picture ever, and how the game that inspired it is the most legendary game ever. The picture itself isn't that legendary. In fact, it's pretty mediocre. I made it so you know who not to ask to draw you stuff. Don't actually ask me to draw you stuff. It'll be bad. I'm bad at digital art. This is actually pretty good, especially for it being the second picture I ever drew on the particular app that I drew it on. But I digress. My hope is that you will support me in my rather ambitious endeavors on this platform, which I will discuss at a future time. For now, let's begin the video with how Smash even got to the point that it's at. Little quick disclaimer, this whole video was planned and the whole script was made before Sakurai decided to make a YouTube channel, so anything I say that is proven otherwise afterwards, or if he says anything that like contradicts any of the things I'm about to say, just know that. Just know that I got all that information before he said it. Again, because I did get it from a time that he said it. That's all I gotta say. Let's get to the video. Super Smash Bros. Is a franchise that started as a game called Dragon King, a 4-player fighting game with characters that had no face, personality, or even a place to fight at. Iwata-san originally brought the idea to Nintendo to use their already established characters and franchises for the basis of the game. Nintendo, of course, said no, because they've always been a company that loves to make shallow and bad decisions. This is before Satoru Iwata became president, by the way, in case you couldn't tell for some reason. So because they ain't about that shallow life, Mr. Iwata and Sakurai-san decided to just work with the Nintendo characters anyway, like the rebel chads they are. So, when they brought it back, Nintendo decided that they do want to make money, and they greenlit what would soon be known as Super Smash Bros. 64, or just Smash 64, which is what I'm calling it for the rest of the video. Smash 64 released with overwhelming positivity. Then again, what would you expect when you get to see a fat rat and a fat plumber punch each other in an officially licensed Nintendo game? To this day, I'm not sure why Nintendo didn't greenlight it to begin with. The idea seems solid to me, and I feel like it would have worked even without the Nintendo characters on it. But at the same time, to this day, people hardly understand half the decisions Nintendo makes at all, so. And if you're wondering now, yes, I am going to be ripping on Nintendo for the entirety of this video. Anyway, soon the game will be released worldwide, and with it, the best live-action Nintendo movie to ever exist, ever. The US commercial. Alright, so you start off just strolling. Pikachu, unfortunately, ain't holding no one's hand like the other three. It's all chill until Mario decides to start the 1,000-year blood war and trips Yoshi. Then Donkey Kong avenges Yoshi, doing a single axe hammer on Mario. Then he decides to team up with Mario to gang up on Yoshi. Man, that's wild, poor guy. DK ain't done yet, taken from Goku's book. He starts twirling around Pikachu like he about to throw him back in Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, man. So now it's an all-out free-for-all, because while Donkey Kong's dealing with Pikachu, Yoshi decides to take out his own revenge on Mario. Mario then takes anger out from that on Donkey Kong, not before Yoshi can shove Pikachu, and it's all boxing. It's just boxing and weaving. We was just having fun through the park, and now it's an all-out war, man, and this ain't stopped to this day, man. They still boxing to this day.
Slam Fest, only on Nintendo 64.
So yeah, the battle closes out with Yoshi knocking the hell out of Donkey Kong, and you know what? I'd say that's it, but it's really not, because it's 2022 and even Steve joined the fight. Like, all Mario did was kick Yoshi, and now it's just pure war. Yoshi may have won that battle, but he didn't win the war, I can assure you of that. So as I'm sure you know by now, it sold well worldwide. In fact, it sold so well, it demanded a sequel. A sequel that I'm not going to talk about yet. Look, All you gotta know in terms of history is that this game was rushed. It was rushed out the stores, and it still sold really well. In fact, it was the best-selling game on the console, the GameCube, and it was the reason a lot of people even bought the GameCube. It did really well in the competitive scene, as you very well should know if you're watching this video. And it even did well casually. In fact, it was the first Smash game I ever played, which is ironic considering it's a Smash game I played the least. But yeah, it did well. It did so well, in fact, that it demanded yet another sequel, except this time there was more of a reason to make it as opposed to last time where it was just a good idea. With all the mechanics, the single player modes, the characters introduced in this game, people were expecting a next entry to do all that and even more, expanding upon ideas that were already expanded upon in this game. And well, it did expand and it did do a lot more. Just not all of it was what the fans, especially the competitive fans, wanted. What they wanted was a fixed version of Melee with new mechanics and even more complicated techniques that they could use to raise the skill ceiling. But what we got was not that. It wasn't that at all, actually. In fact, it was the opposite of that. Enter Brawl, the most controversial entry in the series to date. I personally believe it's the best one, as I am incredibly nostalgic for it, and it has by far and away the best casual and music experience in the franchise, but to each his own opinion, I suppose. But enough about opinions, let's talk about its place in history. Alright, so it all started back in E3 2006. Iwata, who had moved up to being the CEO of Nintendo, announced a new Super Smash Bros. For the Wii, which came as a surprise both for the audience and for the main man Sakurai himself. He hadn't been made aware of any plans until then, so after the show, Iwata asked Sakurai if he would handle yet another entry in the franchise. Sakurai, as you know, accepted the offer and began working on it with his new team. After a 3-year time skip, Brawl releases with all the hype in the world. Sucked out of it the moment fans tried to play like it was Melee, which was right away. Here's where we start with the controversies. Brawl had a lot to live up to being the successor to Melee, and it did in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it also didn't. People were fresh off the Melee boat, especially since the competitive scene was still booming for it, and still is to this day. But neither Sakurai nor Nintendo like competition. That's why Nintendo literally bought their main competitor, and that's why Sakurai said fuck you to the competitive scene that formed around Melee. Yeah, ever since the beginning of Smash, Sakurai wanted Smash to appeal to the casual demographic and the competitive sweats, but more so the casuals, and I don't blame them. It's all a part of Sakurai's philosophy to make games that appeal to beginners and veterans, but I'll get into that in a moment. Brawl has 10 solo modes, being Training Mode, Classic Mode, All-Star Mode, Event Match, Home Run Contest, Target Smash, Multi-Man Brawl, Boss Battle Mode, my personal favorite, and of course Adventure Mode, aka Subspace Emissary. There's also all the stuff you can do in the Vault, like the Masterpiece Collection and Stage Builder, which are all just as entertaining as the solo modes. Classic mode is about the same as it's always been, except this time there's a couple more battles you have to fight with a total of 13 if you count the 2 target modes to get to the final boss of this mode. The final boss, of course, being Master Hand, or if you play on harder difficulties and beat the rest within enough time, Master Hand and Crazy Hand. Other than that, there's not much to say here. It gets real repetitive real quick if you try to complete it with every character, which is especially noticeable now in this game since no one has their own target smash anymore. This game introduced a number of new modes to play in, so you almost never don't have something new to try. Unfortunately, most of them are one and done, not seen in another game after this one. One of those new modes being All-Star Mode. All-Star Mode was a way to play against every character in the game while utilizing a steady incline of difficulty with each passing fight. It was a simple mode, but in my opinion was most effective at portraying the celebration portion of Smash, which makes it all the more unfortunate that it was one of the many modes that didn't return in Smash Ultimate, even if it was pretty forgettable. So it turns out it did return, and it just completely went over my head, and I didn't notice it until I got to the point in the script where I was actually supposed to read about All-Star Smash originally. Yeah, so I'm gonna just pretend I didn't make that mistake and explain it like I had originally planned to anyway. First video jitters. Event match. I don't actually know what this is. Hold on. Okay, so after some event match gameplay for the first time since 1907, I can confirm this mode isn't important enough to go over. Next mode, please. Home Run Contest. I mean, if you've ever owned a Smash game after Melee, then you know what this mode is. You beat up an adorable sandbag, you hit it with a bat when time is running out, and that's it. But if I had to talk about something, it would be the bag itself. Bro, this bag is adorable as fuck. The only thing I can think of at the top of my head that's more adorable than this thing is Kirby. In fact, if I were to get any plush outside of Kirby, it would be a plush of this thing. This little guy has one of the most simple designs I've ever seen, and yet it still works at being one of the cutest things I've ever seen. I was gonna make a video explaining the design of Kirby and how it's beauty and simplicity, and I still might, but I'm definitely making a video for my boy Sandbag first. I think I'm gonna order the plush for Sandbag right now, actually. If I get it by the time I'm done with this video, I'll show it to you all. Never mind, a quality one doesn't exist. That's disappointing. Target Smash is different from the previous two entries Target Smash in the sense that this time around, everyone doesn't have their own targets to smash. There's only 5 levels of it, each with their own pretty vague themes. It's likely made this way because there's a growing number of characters with each entry in the franchise, and this one is no exception. With 39 characters to choose from, I suppose it would be a hefty task to make separate Target Smashes for each of them. Still though, it would be nice if they brought it back like that in Ultimate, but we'll get to Ultimate complaints when we get there. For now, Multi-Man Brawl. And on to Boss Battle Mode. Boss Battle Mode, as I already stated, is my favorite mode and the one I remember most fondly from my playthroughs as a kid. This mode takes you through every boss in the game from PD Piranha to Taboo. It'll put your skills to the test in a different way than any other mode, where in other modes you would beat up something your own size. In this gauntlet, you brawl against bigger monsters that don't get launched by your attacks, only getting angrier after they take a certain amount of damage. In that sense, this is reminiscent of the arena from mainline Kirby games. The structure of the mode, the lobby, even the fights themselves kinda make you feel like you're playing the arena, but with characters outside of the Kirby series. It only makes sense since Kirby and Smash were both made by Sakurai, and while boss rush modes aren't something invented in these series, I'd say with the unique way you play both Kirby games and Smash, it makes for some of the most fun boss rushes you can find in any game series. Now, as I'm sure you can guess, this mode didn't make it into Smash Ultimate either, but people weren't as upset about it as the next solo mode that didn't make it into Ultimate. Subspace Emissary was a massive expansion on Melee's adventure mode, now with lots more levels on a pretty expansive map that lets you play through levels based on even more series featured in Smash. That wasn't all there was in this new adventure though. There were new enemies, new bosses, hell, multiple bosses that weren't Bowser, Master Hand, or Crazy Hand were a new thing to the series, and were all very welcome additions as well, especially the original enemies like Duon, Primid, and Gallium. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce their names. There was a new goal, a new story, a reason for all this to be happening to begin with, and my favorite part, the cutscenes. This was the first time we got rendered scenes outside of the opening, and what we got from them was pretty great as far as I'm concerned. Everyone could see what they've always wanted to see, their favorite characters actually reacting outside of fighting. Yeah, I say that, but since there was a plot, loose as it may be, everyone acted according to what that plot needed, to the point that some cutscenes were just straight up more boxing. Nobody talked, and frankly, I like to keep it that way. The body language did the talking for them, and it was just as good, if not even better, than if the characters did talk. Some of these interactions were probably not what people were expecting, like Mario meeting Link and automatically wanting to fight him, or King Dedede MVP jumping to hug Kirby when he reunited with him. But they were still memorable and something I'm sure most of everyone was looking forward to seeing in each cutscene. Honestly, I could go on and on about this mode and Brawl as a whole, but I can do that another day. Talking about the casual aspects of Smash is a nice and long video by itself. To sum up Brawl in a nutshell, all you really need to know is people hated the competitive aspect since it virtually didn't exist outside of Meta Knight. While a lot of people loved it, a number of people didn't care too much for Subspace Emissary because of the length and the actual adventure aspect of it, the way characters acted, and the entire existence of the Great Maze. However, despite the flack, people were still clamoring for a new adventure mode in the next game. This didn't happen. Yeah, it turns out Sakurai didn't like the idea of people posting the cutscenes in the game online, since he wanted them to be rewards for completing levels. Which makes sense, but from what I can tell, this is the first game you've had an even slightly immersive story with full cutscenes like this in. And the age of the internet had already started by the time the game was released, or even in development for that matter. In other words, you should have seen that coming. But whatever, as I said, I suppose I can understand where he's coming from. You know, I love the cutscenes in Smash Brawl, but in this next game, I gotta say they're probably the best part of it, even though they're not even in the game. Smash 4 was announced at E3 2013 as two games that would coexist together. One was put on the 3DS and the other on the Wii U. Neither hold much significance in the overarching history of Smash, though it is worth mentioning that this is the first time Smash was brought onto a handheld console. So that was pretty neat. Smash 4 always felt off to me, and I'm not just talking about the gameplay. Its main console was an objectively bad one in the Wii U. It had balancing issues near the end of its run, which, mind you, wasn't that long. And the best thing to come out of it for me was the character trailers. And I don't mean the weak sauce trailers for the DLC, I mean the cinematic shit before the game even launched. I never had a Wii U or 3DS, so those trailers were the closest thing I could get to having either game, aside from, playing it over someone's house or something. They were always beautiful to the eye and got me hyped for a game I knew I would never get. Oh, and that reminds me, Directs, the thing the trailers would make appearances in. Nintendo Direct started a few years before Smash 4 was announced, but after the announcement, that's when people started tuning into them and caring about them at all, since that's where we got our info on changes made to the game, including new characters instead of temporary websites like the past two entries had. Speaking of new characters, Smash 4 added DLC to Smash, which is cool since we could get new characters after launch, but it also meant that we had to spend more money on the game. And nobody likes spending extra money. And it goes without mentioning, not every character would be someone that people actually wanted in the game. I mean, seriously. I know new characters to this franchise are hype as hell, but at the same time, I know damn well every last person doesn't even care about over half the characters added as DLC to Smash 4 and Ultimate combined, bro. Smash 4 also added a ranking system to its online gameplay. There was a casual side, for fun, and the more competitive side, for glory. People didn't like this ranking system apparently, but honestly, if I had the game, I think I'd like it a lot more than Ultimate's ranking system. At least Smash is some BS, man, I swear. That's the closest thing to a compliment I'm giving Smash 4, cause the online experience on any Nintendo console is still boo-boo. So in conclusion, everything good that Smash 4 added to the franchise was outside the actual game. In other words, bad game, let's move on. Alright, so before we talk about Ultimate, we gotta talk about the main man himself, Sakurai. Sakurai Masahiro, aka Masahiro Sakurai for those uncultured, also known as Sakurai-san, aka also known as Daddy Sakurai, aka the creator of Smash, aka creator of Kirby, aka the reviver of Kid Icarus, aka the madman himself. This man is creator of the greatest crossover in anything ever. Avengers who? Yeah, Spider-Man doesn't hold a candle to the legal copyright shenanigans I'm sure Sakurai, his team Bandai, and all of Nintendo had to go through just to get Sora into Smash, let alone someone like Steve or Enderman. But enough about Avengers and Spider-Man, which I decided to bring up for some reason. Now let's talk about the big man himself. Sakurai is a man with an ideology for video games? It's more than most developers can say nowadays, let's be honest. His philosophy has always been to make games that appeal to beginners and veterans alike. While doing this, he also tries his best to add new and original mechanics to his games, so as to separate them from the normal jump on enemies or simply hitting them. That's why Kirby's Dream Land was the most original platformer of its time, and with refining will become the most underrated franchise in Nintendo's library. Another thing he managed to do with the mindset of introducing new and original mechanics in his games is invent a whole new subgenre of fighting games by making the fight a platformer at the same time. Not only did he do that, but he also threw items into the mix to make it feel like a real party, or at least in the game's case, a casual celebration. So when you hear about Sakurai actively coming out of his retirement just to do 1,000 Years of Death on the competitive Melee community again, that ideology of his is why. In other words, if you like Smash Ultimate but don't like Sakurai as the developer, which to be completely honest, I've never heard someone who thinks that way, I just want you to know that if it wasn't for Sakurai's way of thinking, you most certainly wouldn't have had Piranha Plant as a playable character. Steve would have most likely played completely different, likely much less fun and worse as a result, and really Smash as a whole wouldn't feel like Smash anymore. It'd be like Smash 4 but like a million times worse. Alright, I'm done ripping off Smash 4. Let's get to the moment you've all been waiting for. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the most legendary game of all time. I personally believe that it goes without saying that the game with the biggest crossover of video game franchises in all of gaming is also the most legendary game in history. Unfortunately, some people don't believe this fact. They'll think Breath of the Wild is the most legendary game, or Black Ops 2, blech. Don't make me sick. And don't forget the forever laggy stuck in the past saying is the most legendary game ever. Like bro, maybe back in 1907, but this is the 21st century, and as cruddy as it may be so far, it gave us the most legendary game ever in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, whether you want to admit it or not. But I digress. Smash Ultimate is the most legendary game in existence, and I'm going to explain why. First of all, let's talk about the release and the hype that came before the release of the game, because that's a very important part and deserves its own exhibit. It's March 2018 and Smash 4 is basically dead. A lot of YouTubers started their careers during that era, and most of them were forced to begin moving on from Smash 4 to something else. Bayonetta had released and completely dominated the competition, giving no one a break, and nothing fun for the audience to watch during tourneys either. Nintendo released one last patch for the game pretty recently and people were still dissatisfied. With only 4 years under its belt, people were already tired of Smash 4, yet had no idea when a new installment would come out. Little did they know.
Hell, it's about time.
Ink is nutted onto the ground and everyone's first thought is a Splatoon sequel or DLC, but it continues. The two Inklings keep having their little battle in the White Void until they don't. The White Void goes black around the Orange Inkling, who stutters in her steps as a result. As the scene gets quiet for drama's sake, the audience also silences from suspending their disbelief on what they now think the game is. The Inkling turns around and what appears in her eye except the one and only blurred Smash logo that everyone recognized except me. After the eye, the screen cuts to the massive, fiery ball floating above the veteran fighters and what we speculated might be new fighters among them. By this point, everyone was screaming, "Hallelujah! Hallelujah!" in excitement. We were all happier than a nigga with a new gun. It was fantastic. It was hype. It was frail in comparison to the next thing that we got.
I think I made my point.
Yeah, suffice to say, everyone was ecstatic. Everyone is here. That was the motto and the selling point we got for this game, and what a motto it was. I'm sorry, is. The trailer was cool at first and surprised a lot of people when they showed Ice Climbers and Pokemon Trainer were returning, but nothing, and I mean nothing, could prepare them for this. Snake! And not only he, but everyone is here. Everyone from third-party characters to DLC to clone characters to third-party DLC. Everyone from my previous Smash game was here, and by gosh, did Nintendo make waves just in announcing such a monumental feat. But little did we know, that wouldn't be all we saw from Nintendo that day. After the glorious painting being shown off and the concept of Echo Fighters being introduced, they had one more thing to show. The cherry on top of all of this, a brand new character. But this wasn't just any character, no. This was a character that should have been in the Everyone Is Here trailer, but wasn't. Cause his dick was too big. Hype for this game was already way through the roof, but now, when I tell you I was screaming my ass off, texting as many people as possible about what was being seen and announced on live television, bro. Television? Never in my life have I been as ecstatic as I was after that Ridley trailer. He's back, and while he's not the big boss he was before, he's still certainly a boss that can lay the smackdown on all of these bitch-ass niggas. We're not even talking about the game itself, and I'm already going off on how much weight this game carried before it was even released. But let's step into the game with some surface level stuff, and I'll keep this quick since, well, it's just surface level stuff. The music comes first, since even before you see the menu, you get an intro to the game. It's great, not much else to say. Unlike most of the games that preceded this one, this game's music doesn't have a specific feel to it. It's a culmination of all the music and vibes from the previous games. So instead of getting its own themes, it gets the fantastic remixes of Smash past. Although, it is worth mentioning, because of this amalgamation idea, some of the new remixes do feel a little too reminiscent of the past remixes. I think Ridley's Ultimate theme suffers from this especially, because every time I listen to it, I can't help but think that it's just a knockoff of the forever memorable Brawl version. I mean, just listen to the intro to these two versions real quick. I'll admit I might just be reaching for this one, but at the same time, why add a new version when the first version was perfectly fine? And then you just add more synthesizers to the new version too. I don't know. Look, what I'm getting at here is if you're gonna remix songs, don't remix songs you've already remixed. I don't see the point. Unless you're gonna do something like completely different. Like, just don't remix it at all if you're just gonna do, well, pretty much the same thing as you did last time. Also, because the game has a big chunk of music from every past Smash title on top of its own new music, the sheer amount of music to choose from honestly feels pretty bloated. which I guess is to be expected from a game with as many franchises represented in it as this one. Other than that, there isn't much else to say, even despite the amount of music, so yeah, overall it gets a thumbs up from me. Also don't know why I didn't put this in the script, but Gangplank Galleon goes way too hard. Next we go on to the presentation. While presentation might not matter the most, including me to be frank, I still think it's worth mentioning. This game is huge. Like, I know I said that a few times already and I'm nowhere near done mentioning it, but I don't think it can be overstated just how massive this game is. It's gigantosaurus, yet despite that, for the UI and the menus and select screens, everything still managed to feel tight, neat, and compact. All of it is simple, making what would be a labyrinth more confusing than the Great Maze only a few clicks on a nice to look at menu. It's a small detail, but it's so on par with everything else in this game that I feel like it still deserves a mention. And lastly, at least for surface level stuff, we touch upon the graphics. Now I'm gonna be up front, come clean, be honest with y'all. I don't really care for the graphics of this game. I know, it's a Switch and they probably couldn't do much else with what they had, but I really just don't like the look of the characters themselves. There's something about, some of them, it just looks like Play-Doh. And this isn't a new thought I just had. Ever since Mario jumped out of that pipe in the first trailer, I haven't been particularly fond of the soft, almost creamy look of this game, or at least the characters. I don't know if creamy is a good word for the look, but it's the word I'm using because that's how I feel about the filter or shading or whatever of this game. Ridley, once again, I personally believe suffers from the lackluster graphics of the game the most. Just take a good close-up look at him. He doesn't look right, he doesn't look intimidating. Just look at him, like, you don't look right, man. I'm saying, like, something about the textures on his whole body, it's just something's off with just him in general. It honestly looks like someone put Play-Doh over an otherwise complex model, which is a shame, because it would be nice if he looked as complex as he should be. I mean, for goodness sake, just look at his Smash Bros. Wii U model. It looks way more intimidating than this one, in my opinion, of course. And Brawl's really, I can't with this one. It looks ridiculous, but man, you know what? I'm gonna just say it. I like Brawl's graphics way more than Ultimate's graphics. And I'm all for stylistic choices and stuff. It's just, I don't know. I like Brawl's more realistic approach compared to every other Smash look in this series, because they're all the same with better graphics pretty much. Brawl's just the outlier just because they had to go with something different since the Wii isn't that much more powerful than the GameCube. And since I don't feel like explaining my opinion more than that, here's Uncle Ruckus explaining something that's basically the same topic.
People say there's no difference between the races. Well, I'll tell you what, I've been cleaning bathrooms for a long time, and I can say, white man just don't smell the same as black Africans. See, the white man just got a better liver. White man eats his meat raw. See, that's healthier. He calls it tartar.
But whatever though, of all the things to complain about in Ultimate, that's a pretty small and subjective one. So, to conclude the graphics talk, they're fine. But I think more could have been done, or I guess less, depending on how you look at it. They should have been more raw, honestly. I would have liked it more raw. Now, let's finally not talk about the obvious reason for why this game is so legendary. Instead, let's talk about this game's solo game. For most people, when they think of Smash, they think of the actual game mode of Smash, but there's a lot more to this magnum opus than just smacking your friend off of a stage in a game with a questionable title. For most of the content of the game, you're actually smashing computers off of the stage, not friends. While not all minigames were here since the beginning of the game, they are here now and are as enjoyable as ever. First one I'll talk about is Mob Smash, which I must admit is one I normally would only play for achievements, but let that not take away from the fact that Mob Smash is still a pretty decent mode in its own right. So, there's 3 different versions of Mob Smashing: Century Smash, All-Star Smash, and Cruel Smash. Century Smash allows you to play against, well, centuries. You fight against up to 100 Miis with the occasional guest character from the roster who also acts like a sentry, trying to reach the goal before you get to a high enough percent for them to knock you off the map. Next up is All-Star Smash, a version where you go up against every character you have in the game without any rest. Take your main and try to defeat enemies more difficult than what you would ever find in the Maze of Century Smash, as these are actual characters with much harder, faster, and cheesy moves. This is my favorite of the bunch, as you get to fight all the faces you could come up against in the future in an all-out battle with no time to breathe until you're finished. And the final mode for Mob Smash is Cruel Smash. Cruel Smash. Yeah. This is not a mode for those quick to anger. This mode tests your patience more than anything, seeing how many attempts it might take for you to kill even one enemy before you even think about taking down the next, who by the way is jumping you with 2 people at the start of the trial. While it may go under the radar for most, I'd say this is definitely the hardest thing in the game and has been throughout the whole franchise. One thing is for sure, and it's that this mode has definitely earned its title as the cruel version of Mob Smash. Cruel version of Mob Smash. Yeah. Back to the main solo modes. This next mode doesn't involve smashing people to death. At all. It's Stage Builder, back and better than it's ever been before. Not only can you build like you could before, i.e. using various blocks and platforms to make your stage seem immersive, but you could also draw now. Which, if you don't already know, it's a lot more intriguing than it initially sounds. You can now use a touchpad or the much less popular controller to draw out any shapes, platforms, and whatever you want to make whatever kind of stage you want. You can even make characters stages based off your favorite characters, not even from Smash even. With this addition to the game, the amount of ways we can make interesting stages, challenges, and other ideas were practically numerous. Now tell me, what other game lets the player have this much control over the way they play the game like this, besides Mario Maker and its sequel?
Name one. Go ahead, try. Name one. See that you can't do it. What? Oh, you want to pull out?
Mario Maker at your ass? Is that what you're gonna say? Mario Maker 2? Well, if it's so great, I want you to know that I'm just getting started telling you all the extra stuff this game lets you do. And if you did think of something that's not Mario Maker or Mario Maker 2, hold your tongue, cause I will change your mind. Now, even aside from the basic stuff like training mode and character, or in this game's case, Mii customization, this game still has a lot to offer in terms of single player mode. And to continue this list, I feel it's time we started talking about spirits. I'm sure I and many other people can make a 50-long-minute video talking about spirits by themselves, so I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. So first off, let's talk about what spirits even are in this game. Spirits are a perfect excuse to put characters from beloved franchises into a game they'll never actually be in. Look, while spirits are a whole other separate thing from actual characters, and there are way too many of them to even consider all of them as being future fighters, let's be honest, if your favorite character was a spirit, then you knew they wouldn't have anywhere near enough limelight to actually be a fighter in the expansive game. Only Pyramithra and I think Byleth being an exception, because Nintendo will always put money and promotion before characters people actually care about. RIP Goku. For real. Currently, there are 1,513 spirits, at least that's what I've been told, and I'm pretty sure every one of them can be represented by a fighter in some way, shape, or form. They did a pretty good job of picking what character represents each non-support spirit, though I must admit I would have chosen different characters for some. For example, I would have made Big Boss from Metal Gear Solid Mario because they're both hairy men, and shut up, it makes sense. Spirit battles and the mechanics of spirits in general isn't all, but I don't feel like going into extended detail about something I don't really care about to keep it a buck, in this video at least. And I'm beginning to realize that I don't want this video to be as long as it's going to be, so. World of Light, blah blah blah, wish they had interactions between characters, want stuff spaced back, repetitive as hell, you get the idea. Honestly, the only truly worthy of note thing here is that you get to play as Master Hand again, making the term "everyone is here" truer than ever, what with Melee being broken in more than 100 ways and all. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. When you first hear the word ambitious, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Marvel? I hope not. The study of the philosophy of moral complexity behind life and death and modern human nature? It's more dumb than philosophical, to be honest. I'll tell you what I think of, if it's not already obvious. I think of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and its wide array of fighters to play as. While Smash is much more than just its characters, the characters are the base of the franchise, being the main thing that people care about. And while everything mentioned and to be mentioned help to make this franchise as incredible as it is, the fighters themselves have and always will be the main driving point of any conversation in or out the community. This is it. This is what makes the game so legendary in my eyes. Everyone is here. From old to new games, skill to no skill, good to evil. Smash Ultimate represents it all in an organized list of your favorite franchises. Mario, with 10 reps, technically 13 if you want to count Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, and Wario. Zelda has 6 reps counting all 3 links. Pokemon has a whopping 11 if you count each character and Pokemon trainer, including the Pokemon trainer himself as its own rep. And while some series like the Kirby franchise only have a few, like the Kirby franchise, the characters used to represent have lots of character poured into them and things from their respective franchise out in their moveset to make them a more fleshed out and rounded character for you to play as, look at and go, huh, that reminds me of Persona or whatever game franchise you're playing a character from. Take Mr. Game & Watch for example. He understandably doesn't have any other reps, but instead of having different characters representing each aspect of his game, the designers instead pour all the aspects of his games into him, morphing his character to show off many portions of his game instead of showing those portions in many different, but ultimately the same characters. No pun intended. But don't let the franchises with a smaller rep count deter you. There's still plenty of depth to be found in most of the big franchise characters as well. Mario characters are the best example of this. Each and every character except Daisy is completely separate and unique from each other. Mario and Luigi you would think would be the same, but ever since Melee have been completely different in almost every way. Because Mario doesn't need to represent every aspect of his franchise like say Steve, Mario can showcase his own set of skills from over the years and doesn't need to have something like a Koopa shell or a Goomba in his moveset. Bowser has the Koopa part covered and really most all of his minions since he's the biggest bad of them all. And even despite that, they did the unthinkable, the unnecessary but still welcome act of putting Piranha Plant in the game, further diversing the already disparate cast of Mario characters beyond what should be possible for a lone series. Because of such a wide net of fighters to choose from and almost every one of them having a unique set of skills, the game gives a plethora of ways to play and a different skill ceiling for every game style you can think of. While some complain about the skill ceiling not being anywhere near as high as it was in Melee, what Ultimate lacks in depth it makes up for in variety. While you can't wave dash, ledge hog, L cancel, or wobble because you're not good at the game, you can instead learn as many characters as you can, almost all with something new you can learn with each. Learning every character is more encouraged here than in Melee because of the lack of such complicated mechanics in Ultimate. Though at the same time, if you believe vice versa to be true, I understand since, this is the biggest roster ever. And I forgot to mention, this game is the most balanced in the franchise despite having the most characters, which is a feat on its own, but it also means you can pick any character to learn and it will likely be fair game against most of the other characters, once you've mastered that character, of course. Now I want to remind you, this game has 86 characters as of October 8th, 2022. They didn't have to add anything to that, but they did. And counting the characters hidden behind different skins, I count 13 more, 14 if you want to stretch it, and that's without counting the villager and inkling skins, gender swaps, or shirtless Sephiroth. But wait, that's not all skins add. With the skin of your choosing, you can truly make a main your own by associating your choice of skin with you. Like me, for example, I like to choose a purple skin of characters because purple be pimpin', you know what I mean? Although he isn't my main, my personal favorite is Pimp Kong, aka Lean Kong. Stupid ass. Last thing I want to touch on for the fighters is the fact that this roster can't happen again, and because of that, there won't ever be a game as big as this again. Sora, Snake, Robin, Piranha Plant, Wii Fit Trainer, and Steve. Not once will you hear of those specific characters being in the same game again. I'm calling it now. There are way too many loops to get through just for 2 of these characters to be in the same room. When I say that this is the most legendary game ever, I mean it. Not for a second do I believe that we will have something as special as what we have here a second time. So many iconic, legendary video game characters in one game. Some I don't even think have even been playable in any capacity before this game. And yet here they are to play as now, coming for their only chance to be a part of something truly this ultimate. So yeah, next time you see Sephiroth fighting a Piranha Plant and Terry, think about how crazy it is that these random characters from different universes and rival companies duking it out with each other really is. And remember how lucky you are to live in a moment in history where we can play the most legendary game of all time. I wonder how many times I said legendary or the phrase of all time in this video. You guys are probably tired of hearing it. Almost as tired as I am of recording the audio for this video. But hey, it can't be understated how awesome this collection of fighting game legends are. On the other hand, while studying the power plant from Kirby Planet Robobot gives me energy to keep going, I'm pretty spent at my first video at this point, so I'll end with this. In conclusion, game legend. Also, Battle Fire Method, don't believe for leading this game, bye bye!
Thank you for your time and good night.